My sister slid a $45,000 spreadsheet across the table like she was passing me the salt. It wasn't a business proposal, it was her wedding budget. And when I laughed, assuming it was a joke, she looked me dead in the eye and asked how I'd be paying for it. If you want to understand how we got to a $45,000 shakedown in a Panera Bread at 2 in the afternoon, you have to understand the dynamic of my family. I am 28. My sister, Stephanie, is 30. For 3 decades, the rule in our house was simple. Stephanie asks, Stephanie gets, and I step out of the way. It was never cartoonishly evil. It was just a slow, consistent grinding down of expectations. When Stephanie wrecked our dad's Honda Civic at 19 because she was texting, my parents hugged her, cried over her bruised collarbone, and bought her a safer, newer sedan. When I needed a car for college a year later, my dad handed me a bus schedule and suggested I pick up a second part-time job. Her failures were always framed as tough breaks or sensitive nerves. My successes were just the baseline requirement for staying out of their way. I adapted by becoming financially invisible. I learned early on that if my parents knew I had money, that money would inevitably be funneled toward one of Stephanie's emergencies, a missed rent payment, a maxed-out credit card, a sudden need to find herself in Costa Rica for 3 weeks. So, I kept my head down. I went into logistics, worked long hours, lived in a cramped studio apartment with leaky pipes, and quietly built a savings account that felt like my only armor against the world. I was saving for a house, a real, quiet place that belonged entirely to me, where nobody could ask me for a dime. Then came Ryan. Ryan was a nice enough guy, a junior marketing manager with a weak chin and an incredible tolerance for Stephanie's moods. They dated for 2 years before he proposed. The engagement was less of a private milestone and more of a theatrical production. He did it on a rooftop bar. There was a secret photographer, a curated playlist, and an immediate barrage of Instagram stories. The Sunday after the proposal, my parents hosted a family dinner to celebrate. The air in their dining room was thick with the smell of pot roast and absolute manic energy. Stephanie sat at the head of the table, her left hand resting on the tablecloth so the ring could catch the light from the chandelier. It was a massive, gaudy halo setting that looked like it cost more than Ryan's annual salary. "We're thinking September," Stephanie announced, taking a delicate sip of her wine. "But honestly, the venues we're looking at book up years in advance. We have to move fast." "Whatever you need, sweetheart," my mom said, beaming. "This is your moment. You only get married once." I kept my eyes on my mashed potatoes. "Congratulations again, Steph. It's a beautiful ring." She barely looked at me. "Thanks, Sophia. Actually, that reminds me. I want you to be my maid of honor." I paused, my fork halfway to my mouth. We weren't close. We barely spoke outside of these mandatory family dinners. I knew exactly what maid of honor meant in Stephanie's dictionary, an unpaid personal assistant with an open wallet. "I'd be honored," I lied, because saying no in front of my weeping, overjoyed mother would have initiated World War III. "Just let me know what you need help with. I work a lot, but I'll do my best." "Oh, don't worry about the small stuff." Stephanie waved a hand dismissively. "I just need you for the big picture execution. I've already started a planner." She didn't mention money that night. She didn't mention it for the first 2 months. During that time, the wedding ballooned from a tasteful autumn ceremony to a sprawling, multi-day festival of excess. She booked a country club that required a 5-figure deposit. She hired a florist who specialized in suspended botanical installations. Ryan looked a little paler every time I saw him, but he just nodded and smiled, riding the wave of my sister's relentless momentum. My parents were contributing, of course. My dad had cashed out a portion of his retirement. My mom had taken a second mortgage on their house, a fact she whispered to me in the kitchen one afternoon, with a mixture of pride and deep, terrified exhaustion. "It's tight," Mom had said, scrubbing a plate in the sink. "But it's her dream, Sophia. We have to make it happen." "You don't have to," I had replied gently. She could downsize. The country club is incredibly expensive. Mom stiffened, dropping the sponge. "We are not making her compromise on her big day. This isn't the time to be practical, Sophia. This is about love." I kept my mouth shut. I assumed the financial bleeding was contained to them. I was completely, foolishly wrong. The reality check came on a Tuesday. Stephanie texted me at work, demanding we meet for lunch at a cafe near my office. She said it was an urgent maid of honor briefing. When I arrived, She was already sitting at a corner table, a massive, color-coded binder resting next to her iced latte. She didn't ask how my day was going. She didn't say hello. She just flipped the binder open and spun it around to face me. "Okay," she said briskly. "I've finalized the vendor deposits, and we have a cash flow problem. Mom and Dad tapped out after the venue and the caterer. Ryan's parents are paying for the rehearsal dinner, but they're being incredibly stingy about it. That leaves the dress, the florals, the photographer, and the Tulum bachelorette." I stared at the spreadsheet. It was incredibly detailed. Row after row of expenses, neatly tabulated. At the bottom, highlighted in a soft pastel pink, was a sum. $45,250. "Okay," I said, leaning back in my chair. "That's a big number. Are you scaling back? Because I know a great photographer who does smaller packages." "No, I'm not scaling back," Stephanie interrupted, looking at me like I had just suggested she wear a trash bag down the aisle. "I'm reallocating the funding. That's your portion." The cafe was noisy, espresso machines hissing, people chatting, but for a few seconds, all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. I looked at the spreadsheet, then at her perfectly manicured nails, and then at her face. She was completely serious. "My portion?" I repeated, my voice flat. "Yes," she said, leaning forward, resting her elbows on the table. "You're the maid of honor, and honestly, Sophia, you live like a monk. You have that tech logistics job, you never go on vacation, you drive a 10-year-old Corolla. I know you have money sitting around doing nothing. I need it for the wedding." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it almost made me laugh. I felt a tight knot of anger form in my chest, hot and dense. All those years of wearing her cast-off sweaters, all those years of eating ramen so I could put away an extra $100 a month, and she thought it was just a holding account for her botanical installations. "Stephanie," I said, keeping my voice low and measured, "I am not giving you $45,000. I don't even know if I'm giving you $45. Are you out of your mind?" Her face hardened. The bridal glow vanished, replaced by the vicious, petulant scowl I had known since childhood. "Excuse me? You heard me. I am not paying for your wedding. That is an insane request." "It's not a request," she snapped, loud enough that a guy at the next table glanced over. "It's family. Mom and Dad gave everything they had. Are you really going to sit there and hoard your little pile of cash while my wedding falls apart?" "Yes," I said simply. "I am. What you want isn't a wedding, Steph. It's a coronation, and I'm not funding it." I stood up, threw a $5 bill on the table for my coffee, and walked out. I knew it wasn't over. You don't just walk away from Stephanie. The backlash took less than 4 hours. By the time I got off work, I had 7 missed calls from my mother and a text from my dad that just read, "Come to the house. Now." I drove to my parents' house feeling a cold sense of dread. When I walked through the front door, they were sitting in the living room like a tribunal. Stephanie was on the sofa, her eyes red and puffy, clutching a tissue. Ryan was conspicuously absent. "Sit down, Sophia," my dad said heavily. I didn't sit. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "I'm not writing a check, Dad." My mother let out a sharp, wounded sigh. "Sophia, please. Your sister is devastated. Do you have any idea how much stress she's under? Do you have any idea what she asked me for?" I fired back. $45,000. She wants me to pay for her dress and a vacation to Mexico. "She told us," my dad said, rubbing his temples. "We know it's a lot of money, but she also told us about your accounts." I froze. "What?" Stephanie sniffled, looking up with a perfectly calculated expression of victimhood. "I saw your bank statement on your laptop when I came over to your apartment last month. I wasn't snooping. It was just open. You have almost $80,000 in savings, Sophia. You lied to us. You act like you're poor, but you're sitting on a fortune." I felt violated. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. "You looked through my computer? That's not the point." Mom raised her voice, standing up. "The point is that you have the means to help your sister, and you're choosing to be selfish. We took out a second mortgage, Sophia. We are drowning in debt to make this happen. And you have the money just sitting there." "It's for a house!" I yelled, finally losing my grip on the calm I had forced on myself. "It's my down payment. I spent 7 years saving that money. 7 years of overtime, skipped dinners, and living in a dump. I didn't ask you for a dime of it, and you have absolutely no right to demand it now to pay for flowers that will be dead in a week. A house? Stephanie scoffed, dabbing her eyes. You don't even have a boyfriend. Why do you need a house? I'm starting a family. This is a crucial life event. You're just being greedy. The logic was so twisted, so perfectly tailored to the delusion of our family dynamic, that I didn't even have a counter-argument. I looked at my dad, hoping for a shred of reason. He just looked away, staring at the muted television. We're asking you to do the right thing, my mom said, her tone shifting from angry to pleading. Just give her 30,000. Keep the rest. It's a compromise. No. The word dropped into the room like a stone. Stephanie stood up, her face flushed with genuine rage. Fine. If you don't care enough to invest in my happiness, you don't deserve to be a part of it. You're no longer my maid of honor. Good, I said. In fact, she stepped closer, pointing a trembling finger at my chest. You're banned. Don't come to the bridal shower. Don't come to the rehearsal. And do not show up at my wedding. You are dead to me, until you learn how to put family first. My parents gasped, but neither of them stopped her. Neither of them told her she was going too far. They just watched me. Message received, I said. I turned around, grabbed my coat, and walked out into the cool evening air. My hands were shaking as I unlocked my car, but as I pulled out of their driveway and watched the house disappear in my rearview mirror, the overwhelming feeling in my chest wasn't grief. It was relief. For the first month, the silence was absolute. I woke up, went to work, came home to my cramped apartment, and checked my phone. Nothing. No passive-aggressive texts from my mother, no guilt-tripping voicemails from my father. They were executing a coordinated freeze-out, a tactic they had used since we were teenagers. The goal was always the same: starve me of affection and family connection until I cracked, apologized, and surrendered whatever Stephanie wanted. But this time, I wasn't a teenager begging for permission to go to a movie. I was an adult holding on to the down payment for my entire future. Instead of waiting by the phone, I called my real estate agent. I'm ready, I told her. Let's start looking. Seriously this time. 6 weeks after the blow-up at the cafe, I put an offer on a 2-bedroom ranch on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't a palace. The kitchen had linoleum floors that curled at the corners, and the guest bathroom was aggressively tiled in avocado green. But the roof was new, the foundation was solid, and the backyard had a sprawling oak tree that shaded a small concrete patio. When the inspector handed me the clean report, I signed the closing papers with a pen that felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. I moved in over a long weekend in July. I didn't hire movers. 2 guys from my warehouse job volunteered in exchange for pizza and beer. As I unpacked boxes in my living room, smelling the faint, dusty scent of old drywall and floor wax, I checked my bank account. The $80,000 was gone, transformed into equity, closing costs, and a modest emergency fund. I had exactly $300 of disposable income left for the month. I had never felt richer. The family blockade broke 2 weeks before the wedding. It started with the extended family. Aunt Susan left a 3-minute voicemail, her voice trembling with manufactured grief, asking how I could abandon my sister at the altar over paper and coins. My cousin David texted me a link to a GoFundMe page Stephanie had apparently set up, titled "Help Us Build Our Dream Start," with a massive goal of $20,000. It had raised exactly $400, mostly from Ryan's confused relatives. Then, Ryan showed up. It was a Tuesday evening. I was on my hands and knees in my new kitchen, using a heat gun to peel away layers of sticky shelf liner, when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened the door. Ryan stood on my porch. If he looked pale before, he now looked practically translucent. He had lost weight. His shirt hung loosely off his shoulders, and he had deep, bruised-looking circles under his eyes. "Hey, Sophia," he said. His voice cracked. "Nice place. Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked into the living room and sat heavily on a folding chair, my only piece of furniture besides my mattress. He stared at the bare walls for a long time. "The florist quit," he said, staring at a nail hole above the baseboard. Stephanie wanted to change the installations from hydrangeas to imported white orchids. The florist asked for another $5,000 up front. We didn't have it. Stephanie screamed at her over the phone. The florist canceled the contract and kept the deposit. "I'm sorry, Ryan," I said, leaning against the kitchen archway. My parents are tapping into their retirement to cover the caterer, he continued, his voice monotone. Your dad took out a high-interest personal loan to pay for her dress because the designer wouldn't release it without the final installment. We are. We are completely broke, Sophia. We haven't even paid the photographer yet. He's threatening not to show up. He finally looked at me. His eyes were desperate, pleading. Stephanie told me about your savings. She told me you have the money to fix this. Please, Sophia. I will pay you back. I'll write up a legally binding contract. I'll give you a portion of my paycheck every month for the next 10 years. Just help us get through this weekend. I can't take the crying anymore. I can't take the fighting. I looked at him, and all I felt was a profound, heavy pity. He was a decent guy who had stepped into a trap, and he was too deeply entangled to realize the trap was designed to never, ever open. Ryan, I said softly, I don't have the money anymore. He blinked. What? I bought this house. I gestured to the empty room. My savings are gone. They're tied up in drywall, copper pipes, and a 30-year mortgage. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. For a second, I thought he might cry. Instead, he let out a harsh, barking laugh that sounded more like a cough. He rubbed his face with both hands, dragging the skin down. She's going to lose her mind, he whispered. She was banking on you caving at the last minute. She literally factored your cave-in into the final spreadsheet. You shouldn't marry her, Ryan, I said. It slipped out before I could filter it. You know this isn't just about a wedding. This is how it's going to be for the rest of your life. It will be a bigger house, a better car, private schools for the kids. She will spend money you don't have, and she will expect you to bleed yourself dry to make up the difference. He stood up, his posture rigid. She's just stressed. It's the pressure of the event. She'll calm down after the honeymoon. How are you paying for the honeymoon? I asked. He looked at the floor. Credit cards. He turned toward the door, his shoulders slumped. Thanks for your time, Sophia. Enjoy the house. He walked out, getting into a car that needed a wash and a new muffler. I locked the door behind him, went back to the kitchen, and turned the heat gun back on. The wedding was on a Saturday in mid-September. The weather was infuriatingly perfect, crisp air, cloudless blue sky, the exact kind of autumn day you pay a country club $50,000 to exploit. I spent the day painting my living room. I chose a color called canvas white. It was boring, simple, and incredibly calming. I put on a podcast, laid down drop cloths, and worked a roller up and down the walls. Every hour or so, I checked my phone. It was dead silent. I knew exactly what was happening across town. The frantic hair and makeup sessions, the panic over the missing orchids, the photographer holding the memory cards hostage until a Venmo transfer cleared. At 4 o'clock, the exact time Stephanie would be walking down the aisle, I sat on my porch with a glass of cheap Pinot Grigio and watched a squirrel bury an acorn in my front yard. I didn't feel vindictive. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a quiet, sturdy sense of safety. I had drawn a line in the sand, and the world hadn't ended. The fallout didn't hit immediately. The pictures hit social media first. Stephanie looked flawless in a dress that cost more than my car. Ryan looked presentable, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. My parents looked exhausted, my mother's face tight with forced joy. To an outsider, it was a magazine-perfect event. The reality hit on Tuesday. My phone rang while I was at my desk eating a salad. The caller ID, said Dad. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Sophia, he said. His voice sounded thin. Old, how are you? I'm fine, Dad. How are you? He sighed, a long rattling sound. We survived the weekend. It was a beautiful wedding. I saw the pictures. She looked lovely. There was a long pause. I could hear the faint hum of traffic in the background. He was calling from his car. The caterer held the reception dinner up for an hour, he said quietly. They wouldn't start plating the food until they ran my credit card. The personal loan I took out wasn't enough. I had to put $12,000 on a card with a 22% interest rate, Sophia, just so your sister's guests could eat their filet mignon. I set my fork down. Why are you telling me this, Dad? We're underwater, he admitted, his voice breaking. Your mother and I were doing the math last night. With the second mortgage, the loans, and the credit cards. We can't make the monthly payments. We might have to sell the house. My stomach tightened. That house was the only home I had known. Dad, I'm so sorry. If you had just helped us, he started, the old reflex kicking in, the need to shift the blame. Stop, I cut him off. My voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Do not put this on me. You and Mom made a choice. You chose to fund a party you couldn't afford because you couldn't say no to her. I am not the reason you might lose your house. Stephanie's greed and your inability to set boundaries are the reasons. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, all the fight was gone. I know. I think. I think I've known for a while. Where are Stephanie and Ryan living now? I asked. With us, he said miserably. Their lease was up, and they didn't have the cash for a new deposit. They're taking over your old room in the basement. They have boxes everywhere. Stephanie is already complaining about the water pressure in the guest bathroom. I closed my eyes. The cycle was starting all over again, just in a tighter, more suffocating space. Take care of yourself, Dad, I said. If you and Mom ever want to get a cup of coffee, just the three of us, let me know. But I'm not discussing money, and I'm not discussing her. Okay, Sophia. Okay. He hung up. It's been over a year since the wedding. My house is fully painted now. I bought a comfortable couch, hung some art on the walls, and learned how to fix a leaky faucet by watching YouTube videos. I got a promotion at work, and I started dating a guy who thinks splitting the bill is just basic common sense. Stephanie and Ryan are still living with my parents. I hear updates through the family grapevine. Ryan is working 60 hours a week trying to pay off their honeymoon debt. Stephanie is working part-time, spending most of her days curating her Instagram grid to make it look like they own their own home. My parents put their house on the market 3 months ago, but it hasn't sold yet. The tension in that household is an open secret among our relatives. I haven't spoken to Stephanie since the day she banned me. She tried to reach out once, 6 months after the wedding, texting me a link to a high-end baby registry. I didn't reply. I just blocked the number. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. They tell me family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that you only get one sister. They don't understand that blood can be toxic, and sometimes letting go is the only way to keep yourself from drowning. I look around, my quiet, sturdy house paid for with my own sweat, secured by my own boundaries, and I know I made the right choice. I didn't lose my family over a wedding. I saved myself from being their bank account. And the peace that comes with that? You can't put a price tag on it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more crazy, real-life drama. Dealing with toxic family members is never easy, but sometimes walking away is the only way to protect your peace. Have you ever had a family member demand your hard-earned money? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one.